One of the good things about the Truss administration is that Truss is, well, she's very ideologically dyed in the wool, proper right wing Tory libertarian. And she has already displayed those. Those qualities almost from day one, not only in the Tory leadership contest, but in her very first opening in her first PMQs, she basically said, this is how far right we are prepared to go in this Tory party. Why? Well, it all goes back to Britannia Unchained. They are only following through on what they really think is going to be the best path for the UK. This is why Liz Truss said, I don't mind being an unpopular prime minister. But as I said this morning to a lot of people, unpopular prime ministers historically have a habit of, well, not staying around for long because the party either A, ends up getting rid of them, or they lose catastrophically at the next general election. And with Liz Truss, at least pushing forward on these really crazy right-wing libertarian ideas that are not only unpopular with many centrists here in the UK, but even quite a bit unpopular with her own party. As we've always said, there are things that are good politically that people really want to do, and then you've got the economic reality sometimes, and those things don't tend to often mesh well together. As not only people on the right of right-wing governments has found, but even people in left-wing governments have even found themselves in the past. So now we're going to go forward and see what the future can predict for a future Liz Truss and a future Liz Truss government. And this came up today. I think it's following off the heat of Liz Truss's yet again car crash interview, because if people haven't learned by now, Liz Truss is not good at giving an interview. She cannot do it. Every single interview after interview after interview she's ever given always has ended up in some massive car crash style fashion. And I can't think of an ever interview where you could say, okay, Liz Truss came out of that. Yeah, you might not agree what she's saying, but if you look at it interview wise, I can't think of a single one. So anyway, let's go diving into this. But before we do that, please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and our donation link called Buy Me Coffee, Wake You Well, Buy Me Coffee. And of course, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. And of course, there's the YouTube subscription again down below as well, and the YouTube thank you button as well. So thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. And I'm saying that at a mile a minute there. So I hope you caught that. So over we go today. To have a look at the Guardian covering what the future, or what the, shall we say, maybe the long, sorry tale of Liz Truss really, really is. So this comes from the Guardian with the title of Ever Bold, Always Cocky, and Never a Mission Accomplished. This will be the tale of PM Truss. Most political plans go wrong, either because of unforeseen events, or they get in the way, or because they are wholly foreseeable future events were ignored in the planning. And Liz Truss's ambitions for a policy blitz in the first week as Prime Minister belong in this first category. She couldn't have known that the Queen would die and politics would be suspended for national mourning. The Prime Minister's admission on Monday night, en route to New York, that there will be no UK-US free trade deal is the second kind of failure. The scale of it must not be downplayed because it just feels inevitable. As we always said, that would be a crowning point for Brexit. That's what many Brexiteers put forward. This would be amazing. This would be wonderful. Of course, hasn't happened. But back to it. When Liz Truss was International Trade Secretary, a free trade agreement with Washington was very much Plan A. It was to be the crowning glory of Britain's triumphant liberation from Brussels, as we just said. The apotheosis of economic sovereignty and a transatlantic solidarity. In the Eurosceptic mythology, The Washington deal was the bridge to utopia, the slam dunk rebuttal to all those gloomy Ramoning economics who fretted over the cost of leaving the EU single market. And again, I think it was Daniel Hannan who said this. It's shocking how many quotes of Daniel Hannan you can actually pull to that haven't come true. But he said at the time that getting that US trade deal would have made staying in the single market, or at least look like staying in the single market, completely foolish. And now that it's fallen through or not going to happen for quite a long time, yet another core Brexit pillar comes tumbling down. But to be honest, that pillar had been crumbling for quite some time. Anyway, back to it. Now Truss admits they aren't even any negotiations. And this isn't a surprise to anyone who has listened to what US diplomats and trade experts have been saying for years, as we've been covering on here for years as well. America needed a compelling commercial incentives to open their markets up to foreigners. They aren't going to do any favors for Truss, no matter how special the relationship with Britain. Also, the UK's petulant unilateral aberrations for the Northern Ireland Protocol in the Brexit agreement have always been advertised the country as a vandal of international law and a flaky trading partner. Truss does not seem perturbed by the sinking of this Brexit trade flagship deal, because she has long since moved on to a new plan. It will be presented to the Commons by the Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, on Friday. And this is what we're looking forward to, but it's now being dubbed, as many people as we're about to see in a moment, the fiscal event of the year. Yeah. Wonderful times ahead indeed. This fiscal event is a mini budget that, without much sort of fussy formalities as the official forecast from the Office of Budget Responsibility, and the OBR wasn't even invited to run the numbers. As the institution, it falls under the same suspicion as the Treasury in the eyes of the new regime. Both are bastions of old economic thinking, the bean-counting reflexes that caused such worrisome affections to the functional European regulations, or the orthodoxy, that Truss has made her explicit mission to purge. That reset began with the dismissal of Tom Scholar, the Treasury Permanent Secretary, on Kwarteng's first day in the building. It was an act of a revolutionary zeal that has caused alarm amongst all the Whitehall fusspots, and the technocratic hand-wringers and the radical Tories of the Brexit era like to see riled. It was a symbolic insurance of international memory by a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who think that there is nothing in the past that can teach them that they don't already know. And of course, Friday is day one, year one, in the new age of economic growth. The theory is that all previous governments have fretted far too much about the distribution of wealth to take hold of both measures needed to generate the stuff in the first place. The furnaces of economic locomotion will be stoked with tax cuts, and any revenue shortfall will be borrowed, as will the tens of billions that have been pledged to cap off the cost of energy bills through the winter fuel crisis. This is just part one of the plan. And already, this is a plan that is going to fail. I think I've often described it as, if you've ever seen, I think, the Underpants Gnome episode of South Park, they have part one, steal underpants. Part two, take underpants. Part three, question mark, question mark, question mark. Part four, profit. And as far as they're concerned, if they, steal the underpants and they take the underpants, it will eventually lead to profit. But the problem is, there's this gap in between, and they can't exactly see how to make the profit that they should be making by taking the underpants in the first place. And this is exactly what the current Tory party is doing. They are doing all these things because they've been told if they do these things, it will lead to profit. The thing is, there's this massive in-between part, which we have talked about constantly, which they are not paying attention to. And that is incredibly worrying. But anyway, back to it. So, part two is where the wheels of growth are free to spin without regulatory impediment. The thickets of red tape and brambles of bureaucracy that seem to have haunted nightmares of backbench Tory MPs for decades will at long last be slashed and burned. On the first bonfire is the cap of bankers' bonuses. In the Trussite doctrine, this is rebuke to the city's greed is a pointless bit of anti-aspirational gesture politics that red-blooded pro-enterprise conservatives should have never have indulged in. The more lubricants to freewheeling finances are also planned, as we talked about yesterday. And there is no plan to even replace some of these. Some are just, we're just going to get rid of those regulations, but there's no plan to replace it with anything or anything like that, which should be shocking because we have seen what a deregulated, financial services sector can lead to. And here's the thing: no one is going to come and help bail out the UK if this leads to an absolute disaster. And a lot of economists are warning this could be where we're heading. And it's not just where we might be heading, it's where a lot of other countries might be heading. Because remember, during the pandemic, when everyone else went into sort of a recession, we suffered a far, far worse recession than anyone else. That has never been talked about a lot in politics either. But I feel as though very often it should be mentioned, and that was because of Brexit. So, the spraying of money on people who have already have it sounds like a weird move in the very straitened times, but that is part of the plan. Truss is braced for the political pain that comes with unpopular decisions. She wears it as a badge of her Thatcherite resolve. She expects the electorate to be rewarded when the growth dividend comes, and in the foresight is the vindicated. It will hurt, but it worked, she says, as Britain roars into 2024, an election and a fifth Conservative term of Tory government. But for that plan to work, a number of things must not go wrong. This is what we've said before. We've talked about this. The idea is that for all Truss's plans to work perfectly, nothing must go wrong. Like, absolutely nothing must go wrong. And think about that for a second. For all these plans to work perfectly, nothing must go wrong. And I can't remember which general said it. It might have been Caesar. It might have been someone else. It might have been even Moltke. But he basically said this: no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And as soon as this stuff starts going, initially, things will look like they are working. But sooner or later, the wheels will start to get a bit more bumpy as the road starts to become a lot more uneven. And eventually, these wheels of free marketism will fall off. And that is what a lot of people are warning about. But anyway, back to it. So, the financial markets must not be spooked by the government's writing of blank checks and waving its hand dismissively at the national debt. The energy crisis must not drag on to the point where the government cannot afford to subsidise households and businesses anymore and starts to claw money back from the people who are in no condition to pay. Jacob Rees-Mogg, as Energy Secretary, will have to break the bad news to people without coming across as patronising toff who has never wanted for anything in his life. Good luck to that. And of course, the financial inconsequence must not leak out even higher to inflation. A distressed public must not lose patience through a ruinous winter and must not place any more demands on a health service that is already struggling to cope mid-autumn. Scores of Tory MPs who never backed Truss for her leadership must not worry about the sliding opinion polls, nor rebel in the votes on the things that irate their constituents care about. Hardline Brexiteers will have to bite their lips and not complain about the inevitable compromises required to keep trade moving with the EU. The proceeds of an economic growth stimulated by the plan must not appear to flatten the usual corporate cats and expense of everyone else. As you can already see, that is a lot of things just in that one thing. So much can go wrong. And yet everything for this plan to work, everything must go right. You know, if you've ever planned anything yourself, no matter how much you've planned for, stuff will go wrong. And oh boy, will it go wrong. So, the people in the former Labour heartlands who loaned their votes to Boris Johnson in 2019 must not find cause to remember their old animus towards the Tories. Oh boy, are they. Truss will have to avoid sounding callous and aloof while explaining that people's immiseration is for their own good, and that these are just visible hazards that are not being taken into account is the routine barrage of unforeseen events. Truss is not afraid of a tactical retreat. She has regained her signature energy policy by way of a U turn. Having originally said that there would be no handouts, there was a plan, but that had to change. Now there is a new plan. It will also change, and I suspect that it will be a theme of her time in Downing Street. Supreme confidence attached itself to an object of impressiveness, of arrogance with power that styles itself as a visionary while stumbling on the obstacles everyone could see coming. Always a bold plan, never a mission accomplished. And I think that sums everything up. I think that covers the disasters that we are going to see. I mean, it's shocking that you have to think about this. That all these plans are coming about because Truss and her cohorts believe that, oh, we've just been following the orthodoxy. They've been, our institutions have been far too much enthralled to Brussels, ignoring the fact that we've had 40 years of these connections that have worked and have done incredibly well, and the growth that the UK saw. You've had businesses that, if they weren't in the single market, would never be as big as they are now. And yet, you've ripped them out of that. Some thought, yeah, this will be a great idea. They're now finding out that's not the case. We've had other companies that we've talked about on this channel before, lost 30-40% of their business because of the trade with the EU. Some have lost it altogether. And that's millions of pounds gone. And now you're looking at the energy crisis on top of a pandemic where lots of companies had to spend their reserves to help them get through this time. And remember, many of the COVID recovery loans that were given out to businesses are expected to be repaid during this time. Truss is not going to retain the red wall. That's almost a certain guarantee. The idea that nothing can go wrong is ridiculous because there are already a lot of foreseen events that could happen that are going to trip and stumble up Truss and shall we say her chariot of growth as she rides along, pretending to the Boadicea against these invading Roman hordes. The land is not as flat as she believes, and I think the more time goes on, that will be proved. And of course, you've got unexpected things that might happen as well. So much stuff could go wrong, and it's shocking to think that all these plans are based on an assumption that nothing will go wrong because we've got point 1, point 2, point 3 is blank with a question mark, but we will hopefully it will lead to point 4, which all leads to profit. And that should terrify you, that we've got a government who is engaged in such fanciful thinking and doesn't even seem to think about the consequences of their actions that they are doing. But this is what happens when you have an ideologically driven government. As far as they are concerned, they are doing everything that is right. And if they do it, everything will be, come up sunshine and roses. But that has never, ever happened before in all of history. Something will go wrong. And when it does go wrong, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, will it go wrong. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.